Hey, aloha mai kako. Thanks for being here. We're going to be talking about the Hawaiian Music Archives project today. So I just want to introduce, if you guys don't know each other, we have from Kamaka ʻUkulele, this is Casey Kamaka.
How's it, guys?
We have Jake Shimabukuro, you guys know him. Dr. Byron Yasui,
Yes.
Woodward. From Ukulele Friends, we have Mr. Shawn Yacavone. And State Archivist, this is Adam Jansen. So we're just going to be talking about the future of the Hawaiian Music Archives and what direction and we want to go to and how we can all help. So I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, tell us about yourselves and, you know, why we're kind of all sitting in your living room, Adam.
Thank you. Well, how's it? As Brian said, I have the privilege of serving as State Archivist and Administrator of the Public Archives. And we have the kuleana of collecting the public archives. And while most people associate us with the government archives that we have, we've got over 500 manuscript collections of individuals and institutions that help shape Hawaii's history. And you know, we have one of the most amazing examples of that other here. This is the original draft of Her Majesty Queen Liliuokalani's songbook. You know, she entrusted it to the public archives so that everybody, everywhere would have access to it, right? We're not the government's archives, we're the people's archives. And so we want to make sure that everybody knows this is there for them and they have access to it to be able to come in and learn directly from Her Majesty herself.
So what's the process for us to have access to the instruments or the music that you guys have?
It's really difficult. You come into the archives.
See, I mean, I guarantee you a lot of people don't know that.
Right. We want to make it accessible because the more we learn about ourselves, the more we learn about the past, the more we're able to move forward together, right? Kava mamua, kava mahope. You know, the lessons of the past are the keys to the future. But if you don't understand your past, how do you unlock the future?
My dad's from New Jersey. He's Italian. My mom's from Kauai. She's Filipino. I lived in Japan, so raised in Kaimuki, right? So I'm a Filipino, Italian, local boy, lived in Japan, speak Japanese, local kid. That's Hawaii, right? That's all of us, right? If you look at the ethnicities, they're even just represented here. So wide diversity of ethnic backgrounds. To me, that's also the ukulele, right? It's not any singular ethnic culture, right? Sure, the parent instruments to the ukulele were brought over by the Madarins, and certainly the Hawaiian monarchy and the Hawaiians embraced that instrument in a very short period of time. It becomes Hawaii's instrument.
You know, I hear people saying this a lot, that, no, well, it's not an ukulele, it was a machete. Yeah, these three Portuguese guys may have invented it, but Hawaiians made it better.
I mean, I've heard it cross many different genres. I mean, the way that you're projecting it out there, Jake, right? I mean, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah,
you know,
No,
like,
it's just
amazing.
not Hawaiian music.
Yep.
No, it's
Right?
everything, yeah.
But it puts us on the map.
No, and I always tell him, you know, he carries the ukulele torch for all of us, for a lot of us, because you get to do, you know, you don't take us with you, but it's that's fine, bro. I mean, I see your posts and stuff, bro. It's okay. You know?
I carry your bags.
We're not bitter, bro. It's good.
You only see the food you eat and everything. You know, it's all good.
Okay,
I had a question for Casey, because, you know, the shoulders that Casey and his family stand on, and his father. Heavy, right? I mean, and the connection, though, the connection with the original three makers, and to be making these instruments, because I'm quite sure, in similar fashion, you as a builder, I see that same curiosity about how other people are building their instruments.
Totally.
And you know, I know we've had those conversations, and we talk about bracing, and we talk about all of these innovative things that are going on, and how do you stabilize for somebody that travels as frequently as Jake, and these instruments that are being exposed to different climates and all of that. But it reminded me of the same type of conversations probably happening with your father and your grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
All
the
the
time.
instruments that are happening
Yeah,
at that time.
I've always heard him, you know, when we were in the shop.
Yeah.
trying to figure out how, or talking to the other guys that worked there. But you know, at that point, it was really only him. At that, you know, it was beyond that stage of my grandfather was gone already, right? So he kind of had to just trial and error, you know, type of thing. So to have this kind of exposure to all these older instruments, you know, and that's kind of something for me, at least for Chris and I, how we move forward is we look back. To look inside, right?
We're going to have an
I'm
opportunity.
sorry,
to do
Shawn, what
that,
is he talking about?
Because this particular piece is a handmade
Yeah,
Mano
see?
Nunez.
And where can you see that? See, and I'm looking at, I'm only fortunate enough to see some of my grandfathers, not even a lot of them, you know, it's because they were just trying to survive back then, right? Just making them and moving them, and so we don't have a whole collection of them, you know.
The music stores or the original three makers and so forth, they were in a way the Hawaiian Music Archives in a sense, because everybody that needed strings, everybody that needed work on those instruments, the instruments passed through those spaces. They were not only instrument makers, right? These guys were repairing it, just as you mentioned too. But it's really neat to be able to have a space where we can perpetuate education and culture and history and all of that good stuff.
Something that my grandmother would say, which is "okage samade," right? It's a Japanese phrase which means "I am what I am because of you." How we always have to honor that, right? Like I always look at Casey and I see how he always try to honors his family's traditions, right? I remember the one of the sayings from our grandparents to the kids was, "Don't bring shame to the family name," right? That was always a big thing. And having this opportunity, you know, to be able to actually go back, you know, and see and touch these physical layers of things that existed, you know, way before even my grandparents' time. You know, it's really, I mean, it's a priceless opportunity, one that I think we shouldn't just take advantage of, but it should almost be our responsibility to go back and, you know, and honor this, make it become a part of who we are so we can have a better understanding of who we are, you know, as a, and like you said to move forward, you got to look back, right? And I think it's just so beautiful. Like I'm sitting here and I'm nervous because, you know, that's Her Majesty's songbook. I'm looking at the pages and I'm just marveling at how she used a typewriter, the dashes of a typewriter, you know, to make the 5 lines of the staff and, you know, to write out her melodic ideas. And then looking at this, being able to go back and seeing that I've been singing this song with the wrong melody my whole entire life, you know? So being able to go back and reference that and be like, oh my goodness, that's not how it was originally written, right? In different styles of music, we have the ability to trace back the original recording or to trace back, you know, the person who first put it down.
That is exactly what we want to share with all the people of Hawaii, the entire world. So they would also have that grounding and that connection they didn't even know they needed. So are you going to share that, or are you just going to cradle it for the next hour?
I was going to ask, Casey, when your grandfather opened the original shop and you started making instruments, right, 1916 or so, or even out of, you know what, roughly how old you might have been at that time?
I don't know. We can check with Chris. Yeah, Brian. He was there.
He was there.
Reason I asked, so this particular instrument, right? This one is right before he, Mano Nunez, opened up the factory with his sons and began to, you know, in large scale. Like this instrument is a factory-made instrument. That's a handcrafted piece by Mano Nunez around 1909. You know, and this instrument would have been in circulation around that time period, prior to your grandfather opening up his shop, and he would have likely seen this exact type of instrument, you know, and that to me is pretty surreal.
Yeah.
You know, to think.
But he died in 1953.
And Dr. Yasui, you've been down into the archives. You've looked through some of our music materials. What was that like for you as a musician and an educator?
Well, it was just mind blowing to see the parchment, the paper where the Queen actually wrote on, and I could read the notes like Jake and I were doing earlier, and how we corrected ourselves with the rhythm of Aloha Oi. And it's just, well, I guess it's like almost like being in a British museum and looking at the music of, the masters from the classical period, but this is Hawaii's own version of the music from our classical period. And as you were pointing out earlier, this is the next best thing to having the Queen here singing the song.
I mean, to me, the Hawaiian Music Archives is an experience, like what you're just talking about right now, like the smell, the feel, the touch, the sound, right? Like, where else can you experience something like that, where you have a whole,
like Shawn said, you leave changed, man.
Yeah,
you're gonna leave changed.
Humble.
Because,
I mean, extremely.
We need to put these in the hands of the average researcher so they can connect, so they can help get inspired to maybe be more, to maybe learn more.
That's crazy. But Byron, I noticed you you keep looking at the Martin 5K over there. Yes, I want you. If it's okay.
Absolutely, that's what they're here for.
Grab it, and
I'll grab it.
we want your first impression of.
I can grab it.
Oh, no. Sure. So, one of the things we wanted to make sure is that all of our instruments have the time period correct strings on them. So anything,
oh, wow, that's cool.
Anything pre-World War II is strung in handmade gut strings, as it would have been done if you'd purchased it new. Everything post-World War II through
That's the experience I'm talking about.
2000 something is going to have true nylon, which they would have had. And then as we start getting into the customs and the higher end modern builds, then we start going into some of the really new string technology. But it's about experiencing it as our kupuna would have. If I walked into Kamaka in the 1930s and said, hey, I want to buy that pineapple. Well, here you go. This is exactly what it would have sounded like.
I don't know if I'm going off track, but I've always been curious about when these fret markers were installed in ukulele and guitar. Maybe the classical guitars have been being made way before 1879. And so I guess maybe they started these dots. I don't know. But in the case of the ukulele, I guess you guys know about the dots on 3, 5, 7, frets 3, 5, 7, and 10 and 12.
Right?
But on the guitar, not 10, but fret 9. Why is that? I'm curious. Am I going off track here?
No.
I was just, maybe somebody could do research on that.
And that's part of why we need to do.
Only we had a centralized location to be able to do that.
And like learning the why.
And I think, part of that story is if we look back at the parent instruments, the modern instruments in particular, the modern rajao, modern machette, by which we now have this instrument, none of those instruments had position markers, those parent instruments, right? So the tradition that made its way into Hawaii and what we see here is consistent with what we know the parent instruments to have. Then there's this time period by which you have this huge influx of course, interest and sales and all of these things for the ukulele, but people don't know how to play the instrument. So to some degree, some sort of standardized system of identifying positions makes sense from an educational perspective to be able to say, this is how you hold this chord, and here's a quick reference, right? From the Hawaii makers, Leonardo Nunes, which is the son of Manuel Nunes, is one that we see him having, earlier, one of the earlier Hawaii makers that has position markers on there, but majority of his work comes out of Los Angeles after he moved, but he uses only on 5 and 7. Which, there's nothing beyond that, just quick 5 and 7. Now, why only 5 and 7? We don't totally know. But at the same time, we just think that majority of the people are not extremely skilled. They're not playing all the way up at the top. They just playing in the lower position. So it's a fantastic question. We don't have an answer for a why. We have some speculation, some ideas, but this is why we want to do what we want to do. Yeah.
I have an idea about why 5 and 7, because those are where the harmonics are. You know, the 12th fret and the 7th and the 5th. It's hard to get those, but 5 and 7 I can see there. Frets 5 is where the pitch, that's the 4th and the 5th, 7th fret will be the 5th letter. 4th and 5th letter above whatever the open string is, you know, A, B, C, D, and E as reference points. That's my idea. As far as the 3rd fret, I don't know, and why the 10th versus the 9th, you know,
It's a big
guitar.
question.
Yeah, that's the big. 12 is obvious because it's a harmonic, you know. That's the octave above the open string.
Somebody's got to play that.
No, Dr.
Yasui,
go
please.
ahead, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
You're asking me to play with
Yeah,
Jake
no,
in front of Jake?
I do. Just somebody. You're holding it, my friend.
You should
That's it. That's it.
Well, because for me, not as a musician, you know, what is it like playing these gut strings on an ukulele? Because they really haven't been strung like that in generations.
You know, Jake, can you tell the difference if you played blindfold gut strings versus nylon strings? I cannot tell myself because I don't play in
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I can
sound
tell.
with touch.
Well,
with
definitely
feel.
the texture, yeah, because these are very rough, you know.
So on in a blindfold test, you'd be able to tell.
Yeah, I would be able to.
Oh, yeah, these are.
How about
Very rough.
sound?
You heard that.
Sound-wise,
Oh, yeah.
if I'm playing it, I think I would be able to tell. But if someone else is playing it and I'm like sitting blindfolded and they're going back, I would have a harder time. But yeah, tone-wise, but.
You know, you got to take into consideration too. Back then, 100 years ago, the styles of playing were very different
Very
from
much
now.
so.
Yes.
They probably just strum chords to accompany singing, not so much solo virtuosic playing. You know, so
Sing
the
something, Jake.
instruments were built for different.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I always teach Shawn that, you know, the style that you play is so phenomenal, but it was not anything they originally intended the ukulele to sound like. So you take this classical instrument and you pull out something so beautiful out of it that I don't think they ever envisioned, but I'm sure they would be so proud that you're able to do that.
Oh, no, well, thanks for saying that. But I mean, you know, going back to like what Dr. Yasui said, my vision of how they played the instrument back then was I always thought they played very aggressively, you know, and the reason for that is because like today, you know, like we tend to play very dynamic and soft, or like, you know, we try to bring out these different timbres out of the instrument by playing softer, but we also have the technology of amplification. Back then, they didn't have that, right? And they were playing outdoors. It was probably loud. There was probably the sounds of ships and, you know, and engines and all that. So I imagine that they would have to play loud. And so by
Just
right?
looking at it, look at all the the scratches.
and you can see the scratches in there. But I would imagine that they would strum more aggressively, and you know, and so with that kind of playing style, you know, you have to have more energy, more excitement, more, you know, more, I don't know, it might make you to move around more. And I think when I hear those stories about the jumping flea, right? You know, right? So that's what I think of. I mean, you don't think of like jumping fleas like this, you know, but you think very brisk and, you know, and so, you know, so I think that's in my mind, I always thought maybe that's how these instruments were played, right?
Yeah, that one story about how the ukulele name came about, the jumping flea.
Yeah.
One story was maybe because the way the hands move very quickly.
Yeah.
I assume strumming.
Oh, I thought it was the left. Yeah, oh, yeah, maybe the right hand too, or
I don't know
maybe
if
both?
it's the
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
hand or the left hand.
yeah,
but-
maybe your index finger looked like a jumping flea.
But that seems to imply that there was virtuosic playing already back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my mom, she had a Kamaka when she was a teenager. So when I was, my first ukulele was her ukulele. When I was 4 years old, she sat me down, and that was my first ukulele. And so one of the things that I've always appreciated was, you know, that I was very fortunate that I had access to this amazing instrument, you know, and I think that is the reason I was inspired to keep playing. Because if I had something that was just, you know, a lesser quality made instrument, and then you play it and it's kind of like, oh, okay, that's nice. And I don't think I would have respected the instrument as much as I did. I mean, because her Kamaka was like, you know, I mean, every time I played, I made sure I washed my hands. I had to sit on the floor, you know, cross legs so I wouldn't drop it, right? There was no risk of me dropping it. And then after it was done, after I was done playing, I would wipe it down and you would place it back in that chipboard case, right? And close it. And then the latches that never went inside always went outside, right? Remember that? So, you know, but the thing that you know, like you said, right, a lot of these instruments probably back in the day were created to be played at a certain volume and needed to project, you know. But the thing that I always loved about, you know, Casey's instruments was that when it's almost like a really well-made classical piano. So when you play soft, it has a certain timbre, versus as you slowly, you know, hit it a little harder, the timbre changes, you know, and the way that the notes blossom, right, completely changes. And that's what I love, because it completely transformed the way I played.
I totally agree with that. And, you know, like, as a musician, I started as playing ukulele and then just got into guitar a lot more because that's what was needed, right?
Yeah.
But through kind of getting exposed or introduced to in the Hawaiian Music Archives realm, and even diving into the ukulele, you know, going, you know, Kingdom era, it made me miss, like, man, I gotta get back in. Like, you know, I gotta get reconnected, because as soon as I picked up these instruments, I was like, man, I miss this, you know?
Okay, so Adam, there's so many, I guess these are accessible ukulele at the archives, the Hawaii State Archives. But how is it connected to the Hawaiian Music Archives, or is there a connection?
Well, there absolutely is a connection, because again, everything within the archives is publicly accessible.
Okay.
But it's in so many different numbered collections that if you don't know, I'm looking for series so-and-so, or I need M93, it's really difficult to find.
Okay.
So what the Hawaiian Music Archives Initiative really is arranging what music-related materials we have in a much more easy to discover way. So it's not really new stuff, it's taking what we have and making it easier for a person to come in and find it. That includes the instruments, that includes the musical method books, the sheet music, the forms, the templates, the jigs that we have that have been donated to us will all be described under this larger umbrella of the Hawaiian Music Archives.
We're kind of hanai into the community, right? Like if you learn from another musician that you might not be blood related, but you're taken into that community. Jake shared with that a little bit earlier of how Casey is his mentor, how he learned from you know, Bryan and Dr. Yasui. And so we have this kind of oral tradition right here in Hawaii, and this way of being hanai'd in. This Hawaiian Music Archives project allows us the platform to hanai the community by ensuring that we have all of those things available to everybody here. That you know, that the stories and the ike kupuna that you were mentioning earlier is not lost, but is entrusted to the community. And so, you know, It's so important for us to be able to move this forward as a community. What I love about this is, of course, we get to celebrate the kupuna. We get to educate the keiki. But really, this initiative it's a community initiative. And that's the beauty of this. The ukulele is a social instrument, but it is a community-based instrument. It would not reside or exist without a community of people who happen to have been here, in the late 1800s, early 1900s. How appropriate is it that the community is the one that is advancing this and moving this Hawaiian Music Archives forward, and hopefully we get to an ukulele museum or something of that sort later. But it's community focus. We need to be able to tell the story of the community. Yeah.
We are going to start digitizing all of these records, starting with the 78s, the oldest recordings. And in fact, we're already starting to digitize our Edison cylinders. So this is all 19-aught to the early 1920s era music that's now out of copyright. So we can create a copyright-free library that if you want to do a podcast, you want to do some online video, you can use this song without having to worry about violating somebody's copyright as an artist.
Wow.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
No, it's huge.
It sounds huge.
Well,
So big.
and it was Harry Beat really exposed me to that concept of the B side of these 78s, because there were one song per side, right?
Right.
The B side at the time wasn't really popular for whatever reason. But today, 100 years later, it may be about a valley that has now been industrialized. It may be about a person or an event that suddenly has much more prominence because of social issues. And so those B-side songs that never made it to LP, never made it to cassette, suddenly have much more meaning than it ever did then.
Yeah.
Yet there's songs that have not been heard in generations, literally. So as performing artists, we're hoping to expand your knowledge and expose you to new music that is also the old music, that is the tradition which we all celebrate today. And hopefully that will include the ability to put these on a more permanent display so that tourists, visitors, keiki can come through and have this history presented them in easily understandable ways, so they don't have to come in, look through boxes of materials. The story is right there